Now, the second story of my pet peeve of agents who think they're attorneys, this happened a while ago, and it was when I had a listing, and the property was actually severely discounted. It was being sold in as-is condition, but it was great upside for a first-time home buyer, somebody to go in there and actually do some updating and actually gain real equity, meaning more money than they put into the property because it was severely discounted. And we did receive multiple offers, and there was one that stood out that was a good, clean offer. However, the thing is, when the buyer's agent called me, they had that snarky, know-it-all, I'm better than you sort of mentality. And immediately I kind of got a whiff of that. And then on the following phone calls, I was like, yeah, I'm not really enjoying the vibe too much. However, with all offers, I always present them to my sellers. And I also show the pros and cons of each one and the different scenarios that could play out. And when it came to that offer with that agent, I told my clients, I was like, hey, look, I'm not really digging on the vibe that I'm getting off this agent here. Something in my gut's telling me that if you guys do accept this one, that they may try to pull something in the middle of the escrow. So I just want to give you a heads up. Well, long story short, my clients ended up going forward with that offer. And sure enough, we, open escrow, the appraisal gets ordered, the home inspection, so on and so forth. However, they waited quite a while in the inspection contingency to actually do the home inspection. So usually you get around like 15 days or so. But the thing about it is I was called about the appraisal first, and they said, hey, good news, appraisal came in at value, this and this and that. So just want to give you a heads up. And I was like, oh, cool, nice. And then they have the home inspection done after, which usually the home inspection happens first. Appraisal usually happens around there. And depending on how much repair or anything asked on the request for repairs, that kind of gets determined by the appraisal, just FYI. Anyways, so appraisal got finished first, and then they do the home inspection. And the buyer's agent, they call me and they say, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up, the home inspection, it came out clean here, this and this and that. However, my client does have some concerns about the property. And I was like, sure, what seems to be the problem? They're like, well, turns out, they want to do some updating to the property, and it's going to cost more than what they initially anticipated. And I was like, well, like what came up? Because, and he said, well, the stairs, obviously going upstairs, they're missing rails, and then, the property is a little dirty and this and this and that. And I was like, okay, so what are you asking for this? And they were like, we were asking for, my buyer's asking for a $10,000 seller credit because of what happened in the home inspection. And I was like, ooh, okay. I was like, just feel free to send it over and I'll talk to my clients. Anyways, they sent it over and they quoted the rails being one of the things. Now, the stairs themselves, it wasn't like you're walking and then it was a ledge right here, so it's missing that. Think of it as the inside of a wall. So there's two walls and you're going up and then that way. So it's the inside of a house, it's not like one is just bare where you could fall off, right? And so I called my clients and I'm like, hey guys, so they did the home inspection. Well, first and foremost, appraisal came in at value, which is good news, but they did the home inspection. The buyer is asking for a $10,000 seller credit. Now, the reason they're asking for this is one of the reasons is the rail for the stairs is missing and a couple other small items here. And immediately my clients were like, well, when they first walked into the property, they saw that there was no rail. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And I said, hey, look, so there's like 3 options that we can do here. Number one, which I 100% do not recommend, is giving them the full $10,000 seller credit. Because remember, guys, this property was being sold heavily at a discounted price, and it was being sold in as-is condition, and it would pass FHA and VA appraisals, so it is financeable. So just keep that in the back of your mind while we're continuing this talk. So anyways, I told them, I was like, I would not recommend taking the $10,000 credit. Depending on how you guys feel, we could say take the $5,000. We could offer them $5,000 in seller credits, or we can offer them 0. And I have a backup plan no matter what you guys really want to do. And my sellers, they weren't the thrillist when it came to being asked for a $10,000 seller credit. Now, at the same time, they were kind of thinking about the $5,000, but I was kind of, suggesting, hey, I probably wouldn't take that. But I was like, you know what? Here, take, 30 minutes. talk about it amongst yourselves, and then that way we can touch base and we can talk on the phone again, and from there we can, determine everything. Now, like I said, when we first opened escrow, I was expecting something to happen, that there was going to be some sort of slip up or some sort of surprise, and that the buyer was going to try pulling that. So what I did when we first accepted that offer is I told my clients, we have a backup offer in hand just in case any funny business really happens here. And so in that moment, while I was waiting, I quickly just kind of texted the buyers, I was like, hey, are you guys still like looking and stuff like that? And they're like, yeah, we are. And I was like, all right, cool. And so then 30 minutes passed, and then my clients and I, we hop on another phone call, and they're like, hey, James, you know what? We said it from the start, it's as is, no credits or repairs. That's what we said. They obviously knew about the rails when they were walking the property, and they saw everything from the get-go. And I said, yeah, I actually completely agree with that. So my clients didn't want to offer any sort of seller credit or anything. And so fast forward, I talked to the buyer's agent again, and I said, hey, unfortunately my clients, they're not willing to give anything for the request for repairs, not even $5,000 or anything. And he was like, what? And I was like, I'm sorry, but they said as is, and the property is already discounted. And he was like, what? You guys can't do anything? Like, not even a little bit? And I was like, I'm sorry, no. We were very upfront about this. And then it kind of turned into like a pity party after that, because all they were doing was just complaining on the phone, like, oh, this property's been on the market for 20 days. And I was like, yeah, that's barely anything. And we received multiple offers throughout, and yours was one of my clients decided to go with. And he's like, this is the darn shame. And I'm like, I understand. And so what's going to happen here, because if we need to cancel, we need to just send me over the cancellation form. I'll get it signed. We can move on from this. So we ended up hanging the phone right there. And like I said, it just kind of turned into this whole thing where they were just complaining the entire time, which I actually found hilarious, because going from the snarky, know-it-all, I'm better than you mentality to things not going to plan and things going sideways, the attitude shift was just, it's crazy in my opinion. So we hang up the phone, and then within like 5 or 10 minutes, the agent calls me again, and he's like, James, he's like, what if you and I give in some of our commissions to keep this deal alive? And I was like, what? I was completely floored by that call. It took me completely by surprise. And I kind of sat there for like 5 seconds just thinking in my head. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I was like, I'm sorry, no. Please send me the cancellation form. I bring up that part because if you go as an agent from the snarky know-it-all and I'm looking down, I'm better than you sort of thing, and then you switch over here to, hey, let's collaborate and give up some of our money or some of our income in order to make a deal, stay afloat, my answer 95% of the time is going to be no. And that's because I always shoot to be upfront with what my clients' needs are, if any seller credits are needed, or if they're at the max of their budget, so on and so forth. And be proactive and communicative with listing agents when I'm the buyer's agent. Same thing, when I'm the listing agent, I always like that buyer's agents are proactive as well. And then in the following emails, he would send over the form and then also be complaining in like a paragraph down below of, oh, this property's been on the market for like 20 days and, we submitted this X, Y, and Z and you guys can't even work with us and blah, blah, blah. Like all this sort of complaints, and every single time I just put, understood, thank you, I appreciate your time. And so I got that cancellation form, I send it to my clients, I get that, signed, and I'm sending it to pretty much everybody involved. And same thing, another email comes in from him, I just think it's a darn shame and this and this and that. And I was just like, how do you go from being the snarky know-it-all that thinks that you're better than me to your cards are out on the table and the deal is about to fall apart and nothing a fault of anything I said, and you're here complaining to me thinking that I'm the problem or whatever, I'm not willing to work with you. That story, I always think back and I laugh because I'm like, going from that attitude to this one right here, I know the name of the game and how to sniff out and have contingency plans. And in that story, I did have a contingency plan, and it was the backup offer. So while we were canceling that, or once we canceled that property or that escrow, I had already reached out to the other buyer's agent. I said, hey, if you guys are still interested, feel free to submit at XYZ price and then XYZ terms, and let's open escrow today. And that's exactly what we did. We canceled that escrow and we immediately reopened the new escrow. But I bring back that story because my biggest pet peeve, or one of my biggest pet peeves in real estate, is the agents that think that they're attorneys. It doesn't help anybody. Matter of fact, I think less work gets done. This is my second story of examples, and I'm pretty sure it's not ever gonna be my last one.